Hi, we're going to be going over the notes. If you were not in class or if you missed something from this lesson, then you are able to come back and you can check your notes and see if you have everything that you need. So when we were in class, we used the read to me function on the textbook. Unfortunately, at the moment, I'm not able to do that with this system. So I am going to read some of it to us. When we're taking our notes, we're going to preview the questions before we actually read the text. So we're looking for, in 1584, who did England give the right to claim land in North America? And we're looking under the Mystery of Roanoke, which you're going to find this heading over here on the Mystery of Roanoke. The success of Spain's colonies in the Americas did not go unnoticed. The great powers of Europe were all interested in the rich opportunities available on the other side of the Atlantic. England was no exception. In the late 1500s, English pirates such as Sir Francis Drake had success stealing Spanish treasure on its way from the Americas to Europe. There were even some efforts to start an English colony in North America. By 1584, however, none of these efforts had been successful. That year, England's Queen Elizabeth gave Sir Walter Raleigh the right to claim land in North America. Raleigh took up this effort with great energy. He sent scouts across the ocean to find a good place for a colony. The scouts made an enthusiastic report of a place called Roanoke Island. This island lies off the coast of what is now North Carolina. At the time, Raleigh called this area Virginia. Raleigh sent settlers to Roanoke Island twice. The first group arrived in 1585. While they were there, artist John White explored the area and drew pictures of what he saw. In a book illustrated by White, another colonist described the Native American towns. The towns are but small and near the sea, coast but few, some containing 10 or 12 houses, some 20. The greatest that we have seen have been but 30 houses. If they be walled, it only be done with barks of trees made fast to stakes. So in that portion of the reading, we find the answers to a couple of our questions here. So England gave the right to claim land to Sir Walter Raleigh. And it has that answer up here, that England's queen gave Sir Walter Raleigh the right to claim land in North America. And then where did his scouts settle? That's also answered in this same paragraph, that they settled in Roanoke Island, which is off the coast of present-day North Carolina. NC stands for North Carolina. And then we have, what conditions did the first settlers face at Roanoke? And we didn't get that information from this part of the reading, so we are going to move on to the next page and continue to read. The 1585 expedition produced some valuable information about the people and places of Virginia. The Virginia colony, however, did not survive. After suffering through a difficult winter, the colonists gave up and returned to England. There we have our answer. So what conditions did they face? They suffered through a difficult winter, they gave up and returned to England. So a difficult winter and returned to England. In this video, I may be moving fairly quickly, and that's because you have the ability to pause this and look at the information and write it and then move on. Number 4, who led the second group of colonists at Roanoke and when did they arrive? Then in 1587, Raleigh sent 91 men, 17 women, and 9 children to Roanoke. John White led this group. Shortly after arriving on the island, White's daughter, who was part of the expedition, gave birth. Virginia Dare was the first English child born in North America. So who led the second group and when? In 1587, we have 91 men, 17 women, and 9 children who came to Roanoke. John White led this group. So John White in 1587 is our answer. I want to give you a visual of where it is that we're talking about here. So I have put a map of the 13 colonies, which you've seen already because we've been practicing that. And I have put an arrow at Chesapeake Bay here in this area. The water, a bay is a water area in between Maryland and Virginia, actually. And we're going to talk a little bit more about Chesapeake Bay too. And then here we see is Roanoke Island. Move that a little bit. There we go. And there's this string of islands that comes around the outside. I've circled it in red, and then I enhanced that over here, or rather found it a closer up version of this map. And so then here again, we see that string of islands. That is that tiny line over there. And so inside that line of islands is Roanoke Island right here. And then we're going to read about another island called Croatoan Island as we go on in the reading, and we're going to be focusing on where that is too. So you can see where they are in comparison to each other, and all of that is right here off the coast of North Carolina. So our next question that we are going to answer, we're going to preview, is explain the mystery of Roanoke in your own words. So going back to the text, 9 days after his granddaughter's birth, White returned to England for supplies. Although he had hoped to be back within a few months, White was delayed. His country was at war with Spain. This war featured England's great naval battle with the Spanish Armada. The fighting between England and Spain made it impossible for White to sail back to Roanoke for nearly 3 years. When he returned to Roanoke, White found his colony deserted. The only clue he found was a tree with the word Croatoan carved on it. White thought perhaps the colonists had gone to Croatoan Island, about 50 miles to the south. Bad weather kept White from investigating. The Roanoke colonists were never seen again. So I'm going to fill in the blanks here for some of this stuff. Our textbook doesn't give all of the information. We are going to give a summary of the mystery of Roanoke, but I will give you a little bit extra information. So you can start typing in that information as I am explaining the story to you. So they needed more supplies, and John White decided that he was going to return to England. And the first thing that you need to know is that this trip from America to England is going to be by a ship, right? And the ship is going to be powered by wind and by current. They don't have any sort of motors. The maps that they have at this time are not complete maps, so they're not always the best to lead them in the direction that they want to go. And they also encounter things like bad weather along the way that might blow them off course. So these are all things that are going to add additional time onto traveling from America to England. Now, the whole trip is between 3,000 and 4,000 miles. And if it was a perfect trip and they had great weather and they never got lost, they could probably accomplish it in about 3 months, which is still kind of a long time. However, there's no such thing as a perfect trip. They are going to encounter some bad weather. They may get blown off course. They may just get lost. So it could take more likely about 4 months, maybe even 5 or 6. So that's what we're looking at here, is between 3 and 6 months travel time. So even if he went straight to England and turned right around and came back, it could still take up to a year for him to return to North America. However, when he got there, there was a war going on between Spain and England. And at this time, people could not just go and explore when they wanted to. They couldn't just travel wherever they wanted to. So they had to have permission from their king or queen. And when he returned to England, the king would not let him return. He needed to help in the war with his ship. So the king didn't let him go until the war ended. And when the war ended, he finally got to return to Roanoke Island. When he got there, it was deserted or abandoned. It didn't look like there was any sort of sign of distress, meaning that the structures were still intact. Nothing was destroyed or burned down. There weren't any dead bodies or bones laying around or anything like that. It just looked like they had up and left. And he did have a clue carved in a tree, the word Croatoan, which was the name of an island, as we already mentioned that. And so he decided that that's what happened, that they moved to Croatoan. Now, also the text doesn't tell us that they actually agreed upon that before John White returned to England. They said that if we have to leave, we'll leave a message of where it is that we're going. So the belief was that people from the Croatoan Island, the Native Americans, came and helped the settlers because they probably ran out of supplies and weren't able to survive on their own. And they moved with those Native Americans to Croatoan Island. And then that's where they were living. So John White wanted to check it out. He wanted to go and find them. Remember, his family is there too. But as they were going, they encountered some bad weather, and not just bad weather, but hurricane weather. And the people that he was sailing with decided that they weren't going to be able to wait out this weather. They weren't going to be able to sail around this weather. They had to return to England. And so after the return to England that second time, John White was never able to get an expedition together again to go back to find the settlers from Roanoke Island. He never got to go back and find his family. So we don't really know what happened to them, except for number 6, that they were never seen again. The only thing we have are these little bits and pieces of the story and some clues to help us figure out what it was that happened to them. Now, I also put there in that red part with the star that there were stories about, and it should say Native American children who had light skin and light color eyes. And that's not what a typical Native American looks like. Native Americans usually have dark skin and dark color eyes and usually dark color hair. So the way for a Native American to end up having light skin and light eye color is for one of their parents to be not Native American. So in other words, one of their parents was a white European. And when they had children, they ended up having Native American children who had light skin and light eye colors. And so this is another clue as to that those settlers actually did end up going to Croatoan Island, adapting and living with those Native Americans, marrying into their families, and then eventually having children. So that is the mystery of Roanoke, and also referred to as the Lost Colony. It's one of the great mysteries of our history of our country. This happened in 1587. So we don't know what happened, and we probably never will be able to know what really happened. We just have to go off these clues that we have. So that is the end of this part of the information. This is what we covered on that particular day. So you should now have a complete set of notes for this first part about Roanoke.